half, 1:30 probably. Good. All right, great. Awesome. Looks like we're recording. So I will get started. My name is James Pepper. I'm the chair of the Cannabis Control Board. Today is Wednesday, May 28th, 2025, and I call this meeting to order. A lot going on at the State House on the cannabis front. None of it is kind of final yet. A lot can change, so I'm not going to get into that this time. I will say that we shipped our proposed rule amendments off to LCAR for their approval. So hopefully those will be adopted in sometime in June. Those rules do include the requirements and regulations for the medical use endorsement, among many other things. I want to say that one of the requirements for a medical use endorsement that's statutory is that any bud tender, at least one bud tender of anyone in a medical use endorsed retail operation will need to have additional training. The Cannabis Board is going to offer that training for free at set times throughout the year. Our contract to develop the curriculum and conduct the trainings has been held up at a few places since we first put out the RFP in December. It looks like it's back on track now. I think as soon as the ink is dry on that contract, we'll make an announcement about the trainings so that we can kind of get those done. I only mention that because, the training, as I said, is a statutory prerequisite of us being able to even issue these endorsements. So we know July 1st is right around the corner. We're going to try our best to have that, allow kind of that date as a target. But we really just can't say that on July 1st, we will definitely be issuing medical use endorsements. But in the meantime, any of the retailers that are interested in that, I would really encourage you to just look at our rules 1 and 2 to look at all the other requirements of that endorsement, and those are available on our website.
Speed up the process where you can help us.
Yeah. Other than that, just need to approve the minutes from our last regular meeting, which is on April 30th.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Okay. Let's see. Next on our agenda is public comment. If you'd like to make a comment and you're joined by the link, please raise your virtual hand. We'll do our best to call on you in order. And then we'll move to people that joined via phone. Patrick, would you mind helping with the order?
Yeah, looks like Elizabeth is number 1. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I'm Elizabeth from Rolling J's Farm, Stir the Pot Cannabis Kitchen. You guys have heard from me in the last 10 days or so. I sent you a fairly long letter outlining some of the packaging challenges that we face. And since I wrote that letter in just 10 days, there has been a 50% tariff imposed on the EU, and then that was rescinded. And also I've been notified of additional, sorry, I'm getting some, are you hearing an echo?
Yeah, we are.
Oh dear.
Patrick, can you take a look if someone's unmuted?
Sorry about that, Elizabeth. Can you try again? I think I caught.
Is that better?
Yeah, yes.
Oh, great. Okay.
So within the last 10 days, there was a tariff decision?
There's been a 50% tariff imposed and then rescinded on the EU. And I've also had some emails notifying me of additional tariff surcharges on some of the packaging line items I buy, which means that, well, suggests certainly that they're going to go up and down as tariffs are imposed or not imposed. And so this just really sort of underscores the point that I was making in my letter about how uncertain everything is, how difficult it is to navigate. I know that one of the things that I mentioned in my letter that would be helpful is, longer product registrations, because that would let us buy domestically produced packaging that has fairly high MOQs with some confidence. I know that there's a bill on the floor of the Senate today that's going to extend packaging registration to product registration to 2 years. But when I look at the current statutes and your current rules, I don't see anything in there that prevents you from doing that right now. And so I'm going to ask you to please take some action to help manufacturers deal with what is truly an insane situation by just extending the product registrations now. I know that if the bill passes, that will go into effect July 1st, but we could really use the relief starting now. So that's my request. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
All right, next hand is Dave Silverman. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. I'm looking at the website. I don't see the rules as filed with LCAR. I only see your as proposed in your initial rule notice. So if you could try to put a prominent link somewhere up front, I'd really appreciate it so that we can all get started on complying in advance. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Dave.
Next one, Sean LaRock. Go ahead, Sean.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Just a quick little add-on to the medical education component. If that is being offered for free through the CCB or through the state, I would love to see that offering extended to any current card holders, and that offering not necessarily be attached to any principal license holder, meaning that I don't need to necessarily be employed at a medical endorsed use facility for me to just be a member of the industry and trying to collect as much CE and credentialing as possible, that regardless of where I am employed, that I have the ability to collect that credentialing and education and carry it with me from facility to facility. So please just extend access to everyone in the industry for free without principal attachments to it. Secondly, this is just kind of out of the blue and might cause a big rub with y'all in Montpelier. This is not to the disparagement of any back-end developers, but I would love to see us as a state and as an industry move away from our proprietary system and towards metric. I know that federal legalization is a moving target, but that's always a big goal for me, of being able to see things like interstate commerce, and folks from out of states trying to interface into our little portal are going to have a heck of a time. Reeling that back here into our current state, Vermont manufacturers linking up with Vermont retailers, and all of the cross-pollination that has to occur of registrations, product IDs, on and on and on. I think that more of our time, resources, and money might be better served for us moving on to the metric platform rather than continuing to allocate resources to a proprietary. And I add that from a comment from a technician at the Flow Hub point of sale system. I was on the phone with them just doing a generic phone call, trying to understand their market share here in Vermont, dispensaries that have them. And as soon as I was trying to get onboarded for some training and educational components, the Flow Hub tech was like, y'all are on metric, right? And I had to go, no, sorry. And that technician, I could hear his face from the phone go, ooh, yeah, we play in Vermont, but you know, we got the little add-ons. And if we could just alleviate more of these bottlenecks, would be much appreciated. Thank you guys. Push a move towards metric. See how we can do that as an industry, whether it's statute or whether it's you guys just in Montpelier. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next hand up is Nick. Go ahead, Nick.
Hey everyone, this is Nick with Emerald Visions. I just wanted to say that metric would be pretty much crippling to the cultivators, and I would hope that we do everything to avoid using metric. It is terrible, and they're pretty much, I don't know, they have monopolization on everything, and what you're doing right now with your inventory tracking and everything is really good. Again, especially for a tier 1 small cultivator, metric would put a ton of cultivators out of business. Please do not do it. It's a terrible idea. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Anyone else who joined via the link, just raise your virtual hand if you'd like to comment. And if you join via phone, you can hit *6 to unmute if you'd like to comment. Okay. I'll close the public comment window. Thanks for that. You know, I think the original decision to not go with metric was made not just with us. It's our agency of digital services has to evaluate all the proposals they get. So we don't have full autonomy on that decision.
I think a lot of the bigger states are trying to move away from metric too, from what I gather and understand from a lot of our colleagues in other states.
Olga, are you with us?
Yes, I am here. Yes. You ready
Okay.
for me?
Yeah. You
Okay.
ready?
Yes, I think I am. Give me a second. Okay.
All right, we see that.
You see that? Okay.
Yep.
Let me get to my screen here. All right. So here we go with the Executive Director Report, May 28th, 2025. As always, I'll start with a quick update on our educational and outreach initiatives. Earlier this month, we hosted a cannabis competitions peer networking event, going over some do's and don'ts. A number of our community members were able to weigh in and ask questions, offer suggestions. So we do thank everybody who participated and engaged thoughtfully. Now looking forward, looking ahead, on the agenda for June is a peer networking event that we will run in coordination with our partners at the Department of Agriculture. They will provide some color on the weights and measures inspections that they perform. We do especially encourage our retail community members to attend and participate. Stay tuned. Patrick will advertise this broadly as we get closer, but June 18th is the date that we are holding for this event. So that is a quick public engagement update. And now we'll move on to the overview of the adult use program licensing data, which is current as of May 16th. Okay, as always, we'll start with a quick review of our current active licenses. We are at 625 as of May 16th. You could probably see from this bar charts that the numbers are pretty stable. We have a small reduction in our cultivator category this month, and we have added our first propagation license to the mix. So those are the two highlights here. Let's see, moving on. That's our priority status slide. No changes here from last month. Same numbers. Moving on. Do stop me if you have questions, since I can't see you. You're very small in that box on my screen.
No problem, we will.
Okay, so here's a new slide for you here. It provides a breakdown of our 97 social equity licensees by license type and licensure year. So to help visualize the progression of our social equity folks, Liz, our wonderful data manager, divided the data into 3 categories based on how long each licensee has been in business, has had the license to operate. And so each of the 3 bar charts corresponds to a specific licensure year. So the year 1 folks depicted in the first bar chart, they have not yet gone through the renewal process. And as you could see, that group includes 20.
Oh, we lost you for a
Product
second.
manufacturers. That's that peach color. Oh.
You're back now, sorry.
I lost connection.
Oh.
Interesting.
We hear you. We hear you now.
Oh, what happened?
She can hear us.
Olga, can you hear us now? I see that you're muted, but Olga, can you hear us? Text her. It's like she hopped out. My guess is she logged out. She's probably gonna try and log back in.
Yep.
So
Thanks everybody for staying patient. Somehow we rarely have technical difficulties with
yeah,
these meetings, but hey, they have.
Today is a strange day.
it's
All
a
around.
strange day. Yeah, the 2-year product registration that we were discussing, public comment, that's part of our discussion later today.
Yeah,
on,
we're
on the agenda.
that's right.
I mean, on the fly, do you have a opinion about whether we can extend it for 2 years without statutory change?
I don't think we can. I think, right now it's the fee section, which is an odd place to put a duration, but the construction so far has been that's got to be renewed annually. There are ways to make that less burdensome that we could think about, but right now the fee collection has to occur annually.
I'm pretty sure it says shall be $50 and shall be for 1 year. Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm back, you guys, but let me find,
Okay.
Can you hear me? I'm
We can
not
hear
sure
you, yes.
what happened there. I will try again. Must be something, my home office issues. Okay, but let me see if I can, and you can let me know where I stopped, where I stopped.
You were talking about our lovely data manager, Liz.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I think
That would be the.
Yeah.
Okay.
What slide number is that?
I think it was your 10, probably.
My 10. Okay. Let me see. Okay, so let me just try to find you guys in my. Let me get a interesting. My presentation is. Okay. Let's see if I could. Slide 10. Are you able? Oh, are you able to see it? Okay. Is that good? All right. So I'll get back into talking about our wonderful data manager, Liz, who was able to divide the data into 3 categories based on how long each licensee has been licensed to operate. And so each bar chart corresponds to a specific licensure year. Folks in year 1, there are 23 of them, including 9 cultivators, 7 product manufacturers, and 3 retailers. They have not gone through the renewal process yet. And then in year 2, those are the licensees who have completed 1 full year and are now in their 2nd year of licensure and operation. We have a total of 37 folks, and we also have 37 year 3 operators, meaning folks who've renewed once already and they're into their 3rd year. As you could probably see visually here, year 2 and year 3 are our largest groups. And of course, the majority of our licensees continue to be cultivators, which is true for our social equity group as well. We'll track that data to get some further insights in the overall maturity and sustainability of our social equity businesses. So that is this new slide. Okay.
Great.
Great.
Okay, good. I know there'd be more on the topic later, so that's just a little preview. Okay, jumping back to our traditional slides. That's our cultivator-specific data here. Issued licenses broken down by type and tier. You've seen this slide before. We reported a decrease of 8 cultivators months over months, and that's reflected here. Percentage-wise, though, we continue to see our indoor licensees at around 41%, and our outdoors around 33%, and mixed licenses are staying steady at around 25%. So no changes here. Moving on, we'll look at our manufacturer licenses. That's 3 months of data, and months over months, we had 94 active manufacturers, same as in April. We are reporting a gain of 2 tier 1s and a loss of 2 tier 2 licenses, but at the same number as in April. Next here is our quick look at the licensed canopy square footage. So here, indoor canopy is in very light green color, and outdoor is this darker green. Total licensed canopy currently is at 968,500 square feet, slightly down when compared to last month. But interestingly enough, year over year, we're at exactly the same number, 968,000 square feet. So if you look at May of 2024 to now, we've gained some indoor and lost some outdoor, but we're at exactly same square footage. So that's the latest. We are good. I'll move on.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. So here another sort of newer slide. Here we are looking, it can offer you a snapshot of license relinquishment specifically over the last months, broken down by priority status and also license type. In total, 11 licenses were relinquished in the last 30 days. In the pie chart, you could probably tell that the majority came from the economic empowerment licensees. 6 of those relinquished their licenses, then 3 standard licensees and 2 social equity licenses. And then the bar charts to the right have some additional detail based on the license types impacted. So 3 of the relinquishments were manufacturers, and you could probably see that 1 each from social equity, economic empowerment, and standard categories, and 8 cultivators with 5 economic empowerment shown in green, 2 standard, and 1 social equity exiting the market. Out of those 8, I believe 6 were outdoor grows and 2 were indoor cultivators that left the market. So that's this, and on that topic, I have one more context here on relinquishments, and this slide highlights the reasons that the businesses have ceased operations as reported to our field agents. In the past months, our exiting licensees cited a total of 13 reasons, with some businesses identifying multiple contributing factors. And you could see it in this pie chart, those responses. Most frequently cited include lack of financial resources, high cost of insurance or banking, and the overall lack of profitability in the market. So that is our relinquishments. And now we'll jump into the compliance and enforcement data that we have for you. First slide is a snapshot of our inspections and investigations. You could probably see here our team has done a lot, including 135 inspections in dark blue. You could see those, and they're started 13 active investigations, with most of those impacting cultivators and retailers. So the significant increase in retail inspections during that time frame correlates with our 420 celebrations that were held across the state. And so in anticipation and during those events, our field agents visited numerous retail locations where they offered guidance, answered questions, and confirmed compliance with all regulations. And I'm very proud of the team for being proactive in their approach, reflecting our ongoing commitment to supporting our licensees and maintaining well-regulated marketplace. So lots and lots of work, great work done in the last months. A little more information here. If we look closer at the types of investigations that are currently on their way, we have you're looking at 3 charts, pie charts. Each represents a license type. So if you look at the light green chart that's devoted to our cultivators, you could see that our team is currently engaged in 1 investigation related to cultivators. And then there are quite a few more topics, investigative topics that are being pursued by our compliance team with respect to the retail and manufacturing communities. So that's investigations. And then other compliance and enforcement actions that we usually take a look at include, and it's 3 months worth of data here. If you're looking for May data, it's in light blue. You could probably tell that our complaint count is very steady months over months. We have 35 this month, and quite a bit of other work happened with 14 letters of warning, 7 notices of violations, in addition to 6 recorded destructions of product and 9 documented cessations of operations. So all that. Now taking a quick closer look at the complaints that were processed last month. Probably see here, advertising violations continue to lead the way. Then there is a list of other. We are good. I'll keep on moving on. A closer look at the warning letters. Most common issue here is also advertising, with 9 letters of warning issued. And then a few additional ones. And then
Great.
Moving on, notices of violations. That's our final compliance slide. And one of each on a variety of topics.
Outside
So-
license operating outside the allowed uses of a license. That blue
Yeah.
one on the bottom.
Yeah. So-
Okay.
Okay, so I'll just, and if we are good on this, we'll take a quick look at our medical program. Year over year, the count is staying pretty steady for our caregivers. And then we are showing a decrease in our patient count of 85 when compared to May of 2024. Nothing really new here. And that is all for the numbers and charts. And now we are onto our staff recommendations for licensure. First, here's our recommendations for the initial licensure. We got 4 businesses here. One of them is a first-time applicant. And the other 3 are businesses that already have cultivation licenses and are looking to expand their sphere of influence. So those are the 4 for you. Are we?
Great. Do you want us to approve these now?
That's what
Separate?
we usually do.
Yeah, okay. Any
Mm.
questions about any of these for Olga?
Nope.
All right, is there a motion to approve these recommendations?
I move that the board adopt staff recommendations to approve the applications listed, issuance subject to final payment of required fees and any other contingencies.
And I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. Now our conventional license renewals. We have 2 slides here. Slide 1 has our renewing tier 1 cultivators. And then I have one more slide here with a few more cultivators, several manufacturers, and a retailer. And again, all licensees on this slide and the previous slide are recommended for approval.
Okay. Any questions about these?
Nope.
Is there a motion to approve?
I move that the board adopt staff recommendations to approve the renewal of the applications listed, issuance subject to final payment of required fees and any other contingencies.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Now here is an early renewal for a location change, and also a change from a mixed 1 to outdoor 1. Their business is staying in the same town, town of New Haven. And, I can provide some additional color, but where we are at is the new location has been found and has been inspected. There is a fence that has been constructed to block the view from the road. But my understanding is that the fabric for the fence has not arrived yet, and the licensee, we do have a confirmation of the proof of shipment received. And so once the fence is approved and the installation is done, that's when they could move forward. So there will be a contingency for issuance at this new location if approved. And the licensee understands that they may not begin cultivation activities until the license is issued to the new location. So with all that said, the licensing division recommends that the board approve this license for issuance subject to the usual contingencies, as well as the contingent on the completion of the screening to go along with the fence.
Any questions for Olga on this one?
No. Thanks
Olga,
for explaining.
have we added it into our process just to warn people about the potential, either current or in the future, of this 50-foot setback for outdoor cultivation?
I think
Do you
it
know- do you
is
know?
something, I believe this is something that we flag, yes, on the
Okay.
licensing. Yep.
Great.
Yep.
All right, great. All right. Is there a motion to approve the change of location?
I move that the board adopt the staff recommendation to approve the license amendment for location change, issuance subject to final payment of required fees and any other contingencies.
And I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you for that one. So next slide here. So the establishments here filed late with an explanation letter. They have furnished all of the required documents and verifications. Again, those came in late. But their record has been shared with the board in advance of this meeting. And based on the received information from those businesses, the CCB staff recommends that the board accept and approve these late and complete applications, as board is authorized to do by Rule 115(1)D.
Great. Any questions for all on this one?
No.
All right. Is there a motion to approve?
I move the board adopt staff recommendations to accept and approve the applications listed, issuance subject to final payment of any required fees and any other contingencies.
And I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hmm?
All right.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, what else do I have? So I also have a sort of a final, I think it's a final, actually I have more. A slide here for the establishments that filed an explanation for their untimely filing, and yet not all elements required to complete their renewal applications have been received by our licensing division. The team has shared all available application materials with the board ahead of this meeting, and staff recommends that the board continues this late and incomplete applications until the next regularly scheduled board meeting on June 25th, when they're expected to be completed by then.
Any questions about those?
Nope.
Nope. All right. Is there a motion to approve the staff recommendation?
I move that the board adopt staff recommendations to accept and continue the applications listed to be reviewed again at the June 28th, the 5th, June 25th, at the June regular meeting.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry.
all right. Thank
No, second.
you.
Yeah. All right. So we got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. So finally here, our licensing team is asking that the board extend these two licenses to the, again, next regularly scheduled board meeting on June 25th, because the renewals here warrant inquiry into affiliations between parties. But it has not been possible to find an earlier hearing date. So June 25th is the request. By then, we will have affiliations hearings conducted for both businesses.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Any questions about that?
No.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the recommendation?
I move that the board adopt staff recommendations to accept and continue to a hearing on June 25th per Rule 1.15.1D.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. And finally, the last slide here is as this slide explains, the board is asked to render a decision on an ID card application by a person with a presumptively disqualifying conviction. So the board may act in an open session or hold its deliberations as decided. The information has been shared with the board in advance of this meeting.
So for some reason I missed this one. Wondering if we can
Same.
just take a 5-minute break for us to read the overcoming presumption memo.
Mhm.
Sure. Is that all right? Okay. Patrick, I don't think you need to put anything up. I think I just need to read it quickly. Where is this?
It's at the
Oh, there
bottom
it
of
is.
the working agenda.
Okay, so I'm fine with, I'm satisfied that this person has overcome presumptive disqualification primarily due to the long period of time in between the conviction and now without a reoffense.
Yep.
Agree with that?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So we need to vote that this person has overcome.
I don't
Uh,
have the motion for this. For
Yeah, we could just have a motion that the board find that the applicant in this case has overcome the presumption of disqualification.
So I move that the board find that the applicant has overcome the presumptive disqualification.
Okay.
Oh, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Right, thank you. That is the end of my presentation to you today.
Okay. Thanks, Olga.
Thank you. Okay.
I think next is Tim Tierney and Nathan Davidson. Hey guys, thanks for waiting through that. Appreciate it.
No, it's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Not a problem. Quality time
So
with a dog. It was great.
So we spent a lot of time with you guys over the summer and fall on a study committee about the Cannabis Business Development Fund. And I know that the current budget or neither the budget nor the miscellaneous cannabis bill re-ups the kind of traditional 500,000 that they've been giving to you kind of on and off for the last 3 or 4 years. But, I think we would like to just get an update on how the fund is, what's going on if you're willing to.
Before we move on though, was the, so far, is the report required
Yes.
still in the bill? Okay.
Yeah, so there is a report in, I think it's section 12 maybe, or 12A, that once again asks us to kind of make a recommendation that you guys should have continuing base funding for this fund so that you can really do some kind of, strategic planning about how it can be most impactful. So if this bill is to pass, we're going to be back at it with you over the summer about kind of exactly what would have the most impact if you were giving some kind of the limited resources of the state to do this in a more sustainable way.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah, so
perfect. I think it's good timing to discuss strategy for the fund and program, considering we don't have additional money this year.
Great.
And but the money that's actually in the account, in the fund right now, I think we have plenty to get through the next legislative session. And I think we can even add further programming with the Vermont State University as well. So I think, right. It's a good problem to have that we have these funds right now.
Yeah, and honestly, there just wasn't a lot of time to get testimony from you all about this. I think that there was a strong desire to put sustainable money into this fund, ongoing money into this fund. It was just they were incredibly worried about the tariffs, as and cuts to Medicaid. So there was very little discussion of anything but those issues. But we did hear a tremendous amount of political will to put money into this fund sustainably annually.
Before we get into the social equity data that Nathan's done a great job compiling as well, but I do want to mention that we do have a program here, and then my main focus is international trade. So, of any of those folks that are on this, we actually have some assistance if they're having major issues with some imports. Or even compliance, or we can even help them on that level. And they can, they can just reach me at tim.tierney@vermont.gov. And I can see how we can help if there's ever issues. We can't get rid of your tariffs, but we might be able to help you out with some issues that you might be having. So
Thank you for mentioning that. Tim.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'll go ahead and share some slides just on the general fund's performance and where we're at currently with applications and where funds have been allocated thus far. So you all should be able to see that now. World's biggest weed plant. So just want to start off with kind of a breakdown of what the appropriations have been spent on thus far, falling into two main brackets. one being Rhodes Consulting Group and their technical assistance for social equity licensees, and then the other being the $5,000 beneficiary payments. For the first appropriation, each of these being $500,000, we saw about 70% go towards beneficiary payments. And then in the second one, we saw increased demand for Rhodes Consulting Group. I think people had originally got in contact in that first appropriation and then really done a deeper dive into whatever activity they were doing with Rhodes in the second one. And then for the third appropriation, we've been seeing a reduced demand for Rhodes Consulting. So far this year in 2025, we've only seen 99 total hours of consulting requested, while in total for the history of this program, we have about 1,400 hours given out. So reduced demand for Rhodes. I think a lot of the social equity licensees who are already licensed got the service that they needed from Rhodes, and they're starting to see reduced amount of people reaching out. And then that other 79% for payments, we have not seen a reduced demand for beneficiary payments. Free money is kind of hard to pass up, so beneficiary payments has not been something that's been passed on by people recently, but the Rhodes Consulting aspect of things has been dwindling. And then just go over where we're currently at with applications. Just so you all understand this process, when somebody applies, we put them under review, and then they're moved into approved or denied, depending on whether or not the CCB determined them eligible. And then supplier setup and ready for vision export is just payment processing steps for my own organization. So from that, you can see that there's a pretty low denial rate for the program. I'd attribute that to the lack of public promotion, and more so when people apply, they get the link to apply, or when people apply for a license, they get a link to apply for this program. So people who have been sent the link have already been deemed eligible. And response times have been decreased pretty drastically recently. For the first and second, we were seeing about a month before we actually get a check cut, not even out the door, but just cut. And now we're seeing about a week on average for third payments for folks. And really it hasn't been an administratively overburdensome program in terms of reviewing applications and getting payments out to folks. It's operating quickly and smoothly.
Can you remind me, I think I know the answer to this, but I just want to remember where we landed. If a social equity applicant or licensee holds multiple licenses, do they get multiple kind of beneficiary payments in? No. Okay.
No. Yep, just one eligible. It's just for the business owner because these beneficiary payments aren't directly to the business, but instead the owner.
Oh, gotcha. That's right. Okay.
Yeah. For this slide, I just did 2025 data because we've sent you already how many funds have been distributed. We're seeing a pretty equitable distribution of funds per each business type. I did a little analysis on what social equity licensees look like. Obviously, the majority of them being cultivators, and cultivators historically have had the highest demand for these beneficiary payments. Only noticed like a 2% difference in the composition of social equity business types and who's getting the payments. So it's pretty equitable for business types. And then on the table below, you can see the amount of funds that we've distributed per tier. And majority of social equity licensees are tier 1s and tier 2s. So it makes sense that they're collectively getting the majority of the funding this year. And that table is also 2025 data alone. Did notice about a 5% difference between the tier composition of licensees and who's getting payment, but that's not really a reason to raise any red flags, I'd say. And then in terms of geographic distribution, kind of the big question mark in terms of geography always seems to be Chittenden County. Are they getting an unfair amount of the funds distributed? For 2025, Chittenden County makes up about 14 to 16% of social equity licensees, but has only gotten 9% of the funding. I'm attributing a lot of this 2025 data to the fact that we haven't gotten later in the year and seen more license renewals, so it hasn't kind of balanced itself out this year. But historically, we've seen pretty equitable distribution of payments per each county. I think the biggest difference I saw in terms of how many business social equity licensees are in a county versus how much payment they're getting was Washington County. I think they make up about 14% of social equity licensees, but it only historically gotten about 8% of the funding. Perhaps I know Forbins is out in the Barrie area and they have multiple businesses under one business owner. So there could be multiple businesses like that leading to this. And then this monster of a table breaks down all of the services that Rhodes Consulting Group has provided historically for this program throughout the duration of it for each business type. And you can clearly see that there's three main services in demand: marketing, design, and accounting / bookkeeping. And for the purpose of this discussion, I think marketing and design can be considered somewhat one and the same. Marketing largely encompasses strategic thinking around marketing plans. How do you want to develop your consumer brand? How do you want to be more involved in your community? How do you want to develop those connections with retailers, or if you're a retailer, develop them with manufacturers and cultivators, etc. And for the design services, it's more logo development, product labeling, website development, stuff like that. And I've researched a lot of these businesses and their social media postings and their websites, and Rhodes' work has been incorporated by them, so they're actually providing some value. And then accounting and bookkeeping services typically looks like Rhodes getting somebody accustomed to a QuickBooks platform and getting them set up in there and then letting them go from there.
Nathan, can I interrupt you for 1 second? So I just want to talk about the legal assistance, that they don't provide legal assistance and help. I mean, all they can do is interpret the current legal structure to someone, but they can't advise. They're not a Vermont legal entity. So just want to clear that up.
Yeah. And since I've joined the program, we haven't seen any requests for legal assistance from Rhodes, so it's not an ongoing thing, more just a service that was provided before my time. But because we
what's that last item?
Oh, I'm just gonna ask about that. The assessment.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the assessment, Nathan?
Yeah, so when a cannabis business owner approaches Rhodes conducts an intake assessment with them, which is about a 40 to 50 questionnaire that breaks down every aspect of their business, from revenue to which consumers they want to target, towards how many products they want to get to market. And that provides them with a framework with what service should we be providing this business, and then promoting that service.
And does that assessment have to be done before they can receive the beneficiary payment?
It does not. They don't even need to reach out to Rhodes before getting the beneficiary payment.
Okay.
Yeah. And we do get a lot of data in those intake assessments regarding like what these businesses look like when they're starting off, because a lot of them, when they reach out to Rhodes, are just starting off. So those assessments can give us a good idea of what these businesses look like when they're starting up. And just so you know, for 2025, the 99 hours of services that people have received from Rhodes has all been for marketing. That seems to be the only service left in demand right now. And then this just breaks down the number on the left of the commas shows the total number of different businesses that have approached Rhodes under that business type. And then the number on the right is the total number of hours they've received. I did notice that indoor cultivators and retailers, for some reason, they seem to use more hours on average when they approach Rhodes. Not exactly sure why that is, to be honest, but if there is some kind of assumption that you guys can make on your end, knowing these businesses a bit better. And then I included the term survival rate. May be a good idea to use a better term. But I thought this was a good performance measure for the success of the program in determining the actual impact on these cannabis businesses. And having 75% of social equity businesses still around and not foreclosed upon and ceasing operations versus standard businesses only 78%. is not a huge difference, and I think indicates somewhat that this program is having a beneficial impact on social equity businesses. I want to look at other states and see what the rates of survival for their businesses, standard versus social equity, would be as a kind of comparison. But I think it would perhaps be naive to say that these social equity businesses, 75% of them would still be around if this program didn't exist, considering the ideology behind this program in the first place and the impact of the marginalization of communities.
This to me is your most important slide, because as you're saying, like, this is what this program is meant to be about, is helping these businesses stay active, perhaps even longer than other, other businesses that are owned by in other industries, right? That's what the support is really about. JP Morgan Chase did a good report back in 2014 about the survival rates of businesses owned by people of color, and how the survival rate is markedly lower than those of other businesses. And this shows, at least the total shows, a small differentiation. So that's good. Sorry,
yeah, and I think that's a measure that for future reporting with the legislature, we may want to include. And then let me just go to the next slide. This is an example, and I'll be quick about this because I know we're running out of time. This is an example of an intake assessment through Rhodes. The kind of questions they'll ask: employee counts, which services were outsourced by your business. And we have compiled data for 1 million different questions like this that I think may be helpful to send over to the CCB in case you all were wondering what these businesses look like when they're starting up. And that could be submitted as a separate report for you all. So if that's something that you all would like, please feel free to reach out and we can compile something for you. And yeah, so this is just another example of those, whether or not they use CRM or POS software when they had approached Rhodes. As you can see, a lot of people didn't have marketing plans, so the marketing service was actually in demand. And yeah, I'll just finish it off there. I think that gives a good idea of where the fund is at.
That's great. I mean, I think regardless of whether this bill passes, we should be all prepared to go to the legislature next year with at least some of this data. I think the main philosophical question that I have for the two of you is, if you knew that you were going to get, let's just say, $1 million every year, would you do this? Would you continue doing this program the way it's designed now, with maybe just bigger checks and more consulting hours, or would you fundamentally change it, or maybe a hybrid of the two?
I definitely think that, we can create something more impactful support, maybe, I mean, obviously, larger. Yeah, I mean, obviously you saw there, the biggest thing is the insurance and the banking costs. I mean, how can we, maybe lessen those, create less risk for a lot of folks, and keep them in the business. I think it's coming up with creative ideas, obviously, too. If we know there's steady $1 million, it would change a lot. And I think through this process, we could create a system or processes that would help out the most people. And I think, obviously, and bring in more experts too, right? Just keep it a really strong sector.
Yeah.
I see. You can go, Kyle. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I was just gonna I was just gonna very quickly add, and I know we've talked about this, and there is an understanding of baseline funding and how we can more strategically think about how to better utilize those funds, especially as businesses get a year, 2, 3 out from their initial inception. How do we kind of pivot some businesses, at least, to more of a accelerator type of relationship with a business coach instead of a business consultant? So there's more teaching to take these skills and move them forward, versus somebody coming in and doing everything for a person, and then those skills are not translatable as easily into the future. And there's a lot of really good accelerator support services in the state. So it'd be really great to be able to loop those in, and I'm sure they would be willing to have those conversations this summer.
Accelerator or stabilization, right? Some businesses will want to stay at the same size, but I don't think this program was intended necessarily to provide support forever, and the fees
Absolutely.
will go away after 4 or 5 years. So, or the fee reduction goes away. So, helping businesses get to a point where they can be really on stable footing when they get to that point.
That's why I like business coaching versus business consulting, because those skills are then translatable and you learn how to do it versus somebody always doing it.
And you can take
for
it
you.
anywhere.
Yep.
Yeah, I would certainly agree that a business coach kind of model for technical assistance could be beneficial, especially because we're seeing fewer people demanding road services right now. And I guess it would just come down to the question of who doesn't have federal funding ties. But
Yeah.
The age-old question.
Well, this has been great. I mean, I know that, you know, we're destined to be working a little bit more closely together over the summer and fall. For the report as it's written will be due November 15th. So we can kind of sketch out what that might look like if that bill passes.
And then we have our biennial report to do.
Yeah,
the
the next
following
year.
year.
Yeah.
From what we did work on last year, but things have changed over the last year. We got
Yes.
another year of data and another year of understanding where help maybe needed.
Thank you both for this. It was excellent.
Yeah, Tim, I know you're a busy guy these days, so
Yeah, well, and
And
well,
Nathan,
thanks to
too.
Nathan. Actually, it's Nathan's birthday today too, so that's he did
happy
this.
birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thanks for
committed
spending with
to
us.
telling everybody about it.
But
Great.
yeah,
All
no,
right.
our pleasure.
Thank you.
Obviously, with this program is we know it's an important one, so we're happy to be part of it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, moving down the agenda, packaging and waivers discussion. You know, this is motivated, I mean, obviously it's motivated from our decisions around packaging from the outset. But it's kind of been accelerated by the tariff situation. Gabe, do you want to, yeah, I know you wrote a memo for us. Is it most helpful for you to kind of walk through that maybe at a high level and kind of queue up the decision points that we could make for offering the industry some relief when it comes to kind of navigating supply chains?
Yeah, happy to do that. Consistent with the very first public comment I think we heard at today's meeting, there's growing concern about the effects that tariff changes may and uncertainty related to those may have on the supply chain for packaging. And staff are sort of looking for a short-term and long-term path forward. It probably helps if I just talk about the current waiver process now, and Mike could pull some numbers to help us out with it. Currently, we've got 11,950 products that have been submitted through registration. Of those 11,870, almost all of them have, self-report using a waiver of some kind. Your waivers come in two types. One is the categorical waiver that we're all familiar with for rubber or plastic gaskets or lids, etc., plastic or rubber dropper bottle tops, where anything in the category is waived and plastic can be used for it. And then there are a separate class of product-specific waivers, the Humidico and Sana concentrate lids, for example. And in those cases, the products themselves have been evaluated for their environmental characteristics and found to be particularly environmentally responsible among the options on the market. Staff are really just sort of looking to make sure that we have a simple process that is easy to administer fairly and consistently, as what's anticipated to happen is that more requests are going to come at them. Just because more people are having their ordinary packaging options limited or shooken up. And in some cases, they're just being provoked to look for alternatives in anticipation of uncertainty. So the board has a lot of, there are a number of dials you can turn here. And there are sort of these competing models of how we do the waiver process. Under the CCB general regulatory waiver rule, the showing that has to be made is really one of necessity to effectuate a purpose of Vermont law. So it's not really enough to say, well, I'd save a little bit of money. One really has to show either that in order to use plastic to get a waiver, somebody has to be able to show really that it's genuinely impractical. They wouldn't be market viable to bring a product to market without the use of plastic, or that there's a health, safety, and welfare reason to do it, or it's necessary to comply with some other law or rule, child resistance being the really obvious one that we're all familiar with. And plastic is very broadly defined, so very in statute and in our rule. So people sometimes ask, the various bioplastics or special plastics, not plastic, not under the rule. Almost everything that you think might be plastic is. And so the waiver standard comes down to necessity for this. So we've got to ask sort of, is the use of plastic genuinely necessary to achieve the purpose of Vermont law? And we're sort of just asking that we kind of reopen the discussion with it in mind, basically what the very first commenter said. We're going to see a lot more of this. So the question for the board becomes, do you want to move into broader categories that are less nuanced? Do you want to keep a system like you have now, which is a hybrid of broad categories where possible, product specificity where needed? Or do you want to move into a completely evaluative system? On the other end of the spectrum, you could require that everybody proposing to use plastic essentially fills out a rubric explaining how they've chosen the optimal, least environmentally irresponsible option, or lack of a weirder and more normal way to put that. But a rubric where the proponent of using the plastic would have to come on a case-by-case basis and say, this is what we have. What we, in terms of we being the CCB staff and administrators, care about is really making sure that we've got clear rules but they give people predictability, in part because with this uncertainty, there's a lot of desire to be ordering in advance and, making sure there's enough on hand to withstand shocks. So that's, there are no easy answers, but that's the conversation we're hoping that you would take up today. And it's not necessary to answer every question today, but we are just kind of trying to look for a little direction in terms of what the waiver committee should be thinking about, perhaps if it should revise its requirements of submitters in terms of the information it collects. Yeah.
So under each of the sort of options that you've laid out for us, would licensees still have to submit documentation under each of those options to be evaluated?
So on one end of the spectrum, the categoricals, you would just say their entire, which you do in some cases, you would just say their entire categories of things you don't have to check with us about. If it's necessary to make the product seal and it's a little ring, don't call us, and the other end, if you have somebody saying, I have this particularly virtuous product that's made in an environmentally responsible way, I can show it. That's the other end of the spectrum where somebody would have to come every single time. Obviously, once a product is approved, just as is the current system, it'd be approved for everybody, but the pitch would have to be made one by one by one.
And then how do we evaluate those pitches now?
That is one of the challenges. I mean, we look to, there's some industry certifications. Kyle, I think, is sort of our resident expert on which of those exist and which ones are meaningful versus just kind of greenwashing. So I think he's got a deeper knowledge of that than I. But once we have said this product is blessed, if somebody switches out what is in it, we really don't have any laboratory capacity or anything like that to detect being had. So I think it really, for a state the size of Vermont and an operational size of this one, comes down to, do we trust the industry certification? Or in some cases, do we trust the brand? Somebody who staked their entire brand and reputation on being very environmentally responsible has a lot to lose if that turns out not to be true. And so there's some good reasons to feel you can rely on them versus somebody who's, usually competing on price and maybe willing to say whatever to make you happy. So you get it, but basically we don't have lab capacity. We have to kind of find somebody we trust.
Seems like that child resistant PHA, whatever, bag or anything is always just 6 months away from being developed and it never actually happens.
I haven't heard anything about that specific bag. I have talked to a lot of packaging companies in the last couple of weeks. Nobody's got a good answer. A lot of people don't really expect this impact to be on folks' doorstep until Q4 2025, if at all. And it's hard. I think we're starting to see a trend from a negotiating perspective, like we did hear from a commenter, where these big crazy tariffs happen, they elicit some type of response, they back off for 90 days to kind of, it's becoming thematic in terms of how negotiations are happening around global trade. I think none of us want our industry to get wrapped up what that might mean. I think there's some low hanging fruit that we could propose today to give folks a little bit more of a clear understanding of how long the current waivers will be available to manufacturers and to cultivators. And then there's another tack that we can take from a waiver systems perspective to kind of dust off maybe how we kind of looked at waivers at the beginning of the market when we were really focused on understanding what was truly necessary, as Gabe alluded to. From a plastic perspective, how do you keep something shelf stable? I think obviously rubber gaskets or dropper tops, there's just not a lot of workarounds for those. And I think not really successful. There's a lot of interesting global logistics that happen no matter if it's glass, tin, or plastic. For instance, there's like 2 major tin deposits in the US. Neither one of them are ever going to be mined. It just doesn't make business sense. And there's too many environmental hoops to move through. So they're always coming from a different country. So it's hard to think about domestically made packaging products versus domestic. Not everything is just because it's made here doesn't mean it was sourced from here. Right. So there's always going to be this spider web of problems. But how do we alleviate it where we can? I think one of the things we could do is just push. We have a 1-year waiver as kind of like a standard. You just kind of see, hey, and evaluate who is using a specific waiver. Is it one that's working for a number of different market participants, so on and so forth. And I think if you look at the waivers that we have granted, we haven't pulled a lot of them completely back, but I can understand how from a business perspective, it's better to know that that waiver is going to be there for a couple years versus having to worry that it might go away every single year. Even if your product registration is good for a year, the waiver goes away and you still might be able to run out your existing supply, yada, yada, yada. I think we could extend the current waivers to like October 2027. They're set to expire at the end of, or we would probably renew them this October, but we can give folks that availability. In the meantime, we can kind of reevaluate, reconfigure the waiver system to kind of think not strictly on the components of what makes for a prudent waiver submission and granted option for folks, but add some additional categories to that to kind of better understand and kind of evaluate where global markets are in 2025 versus where they were in 2021 when we first started here. So I would propose that I'm happy to take the lead on redoing how waivers come to us, how they're evaluated, how can we kind of make it a little bit more easy for staff and for the public to understand why and where and when decisions are made, and not be so hyper-focused on the components that I have been focused on, which is, does this make sense for our waste system? Like, I wish that we could source money to build an industrial compost facility in Vermont, but reading the tea leaves, I'm sure that's far away from the the General Assembly's priority list
first.
right now. There are other options, I think that we could look at moving forward, but I'm comfortable moving waivers, giving them a longer runway. I totally understand how it sometimes takes 6 months to get your artwork lined up and to get everything ordered. And then, knowing that there's only 6 months left on the waiver, it creates uncertainty, even if that's not the intention. So I'm happy to move in that direction while we try and work this summer in anticipation of more waivers as things become less theoretical and more real, to kind of be ready for, that coming down the road.
So if one of the packaging options that we have were to cease to exist or stop operating in the US or stop shipping to the US, what would we, between now and October 2027, do you have a thought on what the backup plan could be?
I think we've had a look. I haven't heard from the companies that I've spoken to that are on our waiver list that is a concern of theirs. But again, things change all the time. They don't. I'm not getting calls from them about this. We're getting calls from licensees. I understand why. The backup plan would be, again, we can think about different criteria that would make more logical sense for where we are
Yeah.
Now, I really hate to try and gut the program and what we've accomplished thus far. I don't want this market to be all in bags. I just think there's a lot of other markets that that's all you see when you go into a dispensary. And I have been talking to some companies about creating a flower bag. You know, there's not a lot of cannabis companies that make a non-child resistant bag, because us and Oregon are the only two states that don't need child resistance for flower. And there's at least one company that's willing to do that as a competitor to the current flower bag that is on the market. I don't want to get carried away and start naming things right now, but I know that that's a real consideration for this company if that's something that it would be like a 63% PCR plastic bag, which is better than what we've required for a lot of the bags that we put on the market over the last 6 months or so. So
do you have a sense, and I realize that this is kind of like out of left field, but it seems to me, like I showed you, I got a coffee today, hot tea, and an entirely paper cut, like the lid folded down. So do you have a sense of how many industries in general are just moving away from plastic? Because I was surprised by that. And it does seem like other things, and I've brought up other anecdotal examples of how many things just seem to be moving away from plastic in general.
I don't know if I've got a specific answer for you, other than I think, you know, consumer thought around the kind of exponential impact of using plastics has certainly come from the rear view into the front and center fold. You hear about microplastics all the time. You hear about plastic issues at you know, landfills and leaching into our waterways. It's a topic of conversation. So I think there are a lot of major brands that are looking to kind of move away from your traditional plastics. I mean, we've heard about PHA bags, as you alluded to, and like I believe it's Frito-Lay was trying to put all of their chip bags into a PHA, which will compost without industrial composting conditions. Carlsberg beer was trying to brew a beer that you could put into one of these types of packaging options. There's so much, I think, that's not at scale yet, though. And I think there's folks that are trying to, or companies that are trying to understand where consumer preferences are going in this broader context of where global supply chains are and where they may go if you know, this trying to return manufacturing to the United States ends up happening. I'm not going to get into politics in that way. I mean, I used to work for a big manufacturing company. I'm not sure I see.
I'm just wondering if more options will become available. If that's the trajectory that's already started, if more options will become available in the next 2 years, for, you know, that are.
I think there's other issues there from a cannabis perspective, and I think it's getting other states to not need child-resistant, hard, heavy packaging in order to. And those are conversations we have in Canada, right? So the more states do certain things, the more the packaging industry will respond. How that evolves amongst global trade and consumer preferences around plastic, I'm not 100% sure, but you know, I think we're on the front end of something. But I think that there's ways that we can kind of meet people where they're at while still kind of carrying forward the goal, which was to root out as much unneeded plastic from the market as we could. And I mean, the definition is pretty broad, not gonna lie. That's the same definition that was used in the plastic bag ban developed by the EC. Again, it's not, I recognize that it's not the same as switching from a plastic bag to a paper bag at your grocery store, as it is with cannabis packaging, because of those regulations that are prevalent. But again, I think the long and the short of it is, I think that there's some things that we can ask staff to do today, and there's other things that we can kind of plan the waiver portal in a way that gives folks a little bit better understanding of what we're looking for and what might make sense moving forward to consider in addition to Vermont's environmental waste management here.
So, so you're on I mean, you're the chair of the Canner Environmental Subcommittee, right?
Yes,
Um,
co-chair, but
Co-chair, yeah. So you kind of have a better sense than either of us, I think, about what's going on nationally. I know New York is looking at PCR, right? I mean, that's their plan
yes,
to reduce plastic.
yes. There's a couple
Post-consumer recycled.
post-consumer recycled plastic, and they require, I believe it's a 43%, which is how we've kind of aligned some of our waivers that we issued last October, from a bag and a lid perspective. They put that onus on their licensees. If compliance agents are out spot checking and they see something that's not approved, there's fines associated with that, and they pull product because of packaging, even if it's not related to a health and safety concern necessarily. But I think one of the things that is different here is that we have product registration, right? So if I think there's some questions in my mind about moving into a strictly copying what New York does, because then we're asking, if we don't consider plastic from a product, or excuse me, packaging from a product registration perspective, then all of us could be in a position where we're finding a business and taking product off the shelf because it's in the wrong packaging. I think one of the cool things about product registration is it helps people understand what's necessary, or at the specific list, what's necessary and what's needed, so you don't find yourself in that situation. I think it also might put stress on our staff that are doing product registration if they've got to review packaging, not from a specific waiver list, but they're the ones saying, oh, this meets, I'm looking at, a PCR SKU that lists the different types of plastic on it, and does it add up to 43%? And I need a statement of conformity to make sure that the product that was shipped from Southeast Asia or China or wherever to the United States is in fact what it says it was when it was pellets, and now that it's been kind of transformed into this, blah, 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 blah. Those are things that I've done to kind of help kind of set the waivers. But if there's not a set list, I'm concerned that that work will be pushed to a different spot in our staff, supply chain, for lack of a better way to describe it, and it might slow down product registration. So, either we don't, if we did something like New York does. And again, like, these conversations can be challenging at Canada, because I not only am talking to New York, which is doing cool things, but North Dakota's in there, Texas is in there. And so everybody's still all over the place from a cannabis perspective, let alone how environmentally conscious you want to be, not just about packaging, but about all the other components that make up, the environmental footprint that your cannabis business might put onto folks, in and around your specific jurisdiction. But, I don't know if I necessarily want a system where we go out and we spot check plastic and then find somebody and pull product because it's in the wrong packaging. And it's also challenging for me to kind of move it to the product registration team to kind of, without a defined list, to kind of be that gatekeeper. It might slow other things down. So I think there's opportunities to continue, from my perspective, the specific waivers, but really reconfigure the waiver system to where it's a little bit more clear and understood what's going to make for a successful waiver.
Is there a issue with, well, first off, dumb question. Can PCR plastic be recycled?
Yeah, it's already been recycled.
But can it be again?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
It depends, but
Yeah,
okay. Black plastic's hard to recycle, and that's another challenge because a lot of things have to be opaque, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but there are opportunities to recycle, and again, we can get into the minutia of will a recycling facility, a lot of these are too small to kind of actually be recycled, and they'll end up in a landfill regardless, but the compostable plastics are really cool, but I don't think the infrastructure is going to be around for too long. So I'm happy to pivot in a PCR waste. There's also ocean-bound plastic, which is a kind of subset of PCR plastic. It's plastic that's been recovered from the ocean and then reconfigured.
Well, so this is kind of my second question. Is there a problem with greenwashing, or, non-verifiable claims from these PCR plastic companies or ocean-bound plastic companies?
Absolutely. And that's another reason why I'm a little I'm a little hesitant to kind of open it up because there's a lot of folks, as Gabe kind of alluded to, like there are a lot of brands out there that speak their truth and they do business in that way. And there's a lot of other claims that I believe are false or misleading, and that you could be put in an unfortunate situation where unless you're doing your due diligence and understanding where it's coming from, you might be buying something that you not are in fact buying. I even had a cannabis company explain it to me in a way, like think about it from a how we track cannabis perspective. Like these are coming in batches, right? And like if one batch today could be different than the batch tomorrow. So even if we allow one thing today, that doesn't mean that it's the same plastic pellets that are being shipped into the United States tomorrow. So it's convoluted. It's like, where do we draw like the line of how much inquiry we're willing to put into this? But I think, for our waiver system's faults, I do believe it does give folks an understanding of what is and what is not allowed, and allows folks to kind of have that understanding when they go to product registration, that if this is approved, my product on the shelf will be not pulled because I used the wrong packaging.
Yeah, it just makes me pretty nervous just having these like essentially three companies, Humidco, Santa, and Elevate.
Well, there's more than three, but
Okay.
again, like the onus has always been on somebody to come to the waiver system and present a new company. Like there's, so.
Yeah, for me personally, and I generally defer to you on all of these issues, but I also feel like these are extraordinary circumstances. I feel like, we approved a pilot and then fully for a disposable vape pen, because we kind of determined that the public policy and the kind of system that we set up overcame the kind of downside of having single-use waste, single-use products. I personally would feel the same for PCR above a certain level, as long as the retailer or the manufacturer, whomever it is, had a take back program where they would recycle it, kind of like at the grocery store before the plastic bag ban. They had those bins where you couldn't bring plastic bags back. But again, this is an area where I largely, defer to your expertise. I mean,
Which part do you see as extraordinary? The potential change in availability and cost? Is that
the
part that's
cost, the kind of somewhat limited options, supply chain disruptions, and the fact that, we haven't seen any great innovation that I can tell of in the PHA front in the last 2 years. I mean, I just haven't seen it. It always felt like these companies, we talked to so many of them, they're always like
That's
one
the
step
problem.
away.
Getting out of research and development is tough.
Right.
I don't know if I'd be willing to kind of go there today. I think that that's a conversation we could continue to have personally.
Yeah.
That's where, but the waivers that are on our website, I'd be happy to extend those to give folks an understanding that they're going to be there for a while we work from a long-term perspective and kind of re-evaluating the waiver program and trying to give it a breath of fresh life.
And your proposal was until the end of October?
Right now I believe that they are set to expire in October of 2025 because we granted them in October of 2024, and they're on a year cycle. And I'm just saying, let's push that to October 2027 in the short term while we continue to reevaluate what's the best path forward. Everybody who I've talked to about take back programs has kind of given me the cold shoulder, quite frankly.
Right.
So there's too many challenges, which I respect, to kind of institute that. So maybe this will spur more conversation to come back to us from the business community that they'd be willing to do something like that. I don't know, but
I think the hesitation that I've heard, and there's probably more than one opinion on this, but it was the reuse of it, not just the take back.
You mean like cleaning and reusing it?
cleaning and reusing.
But there are lots of other uses. Once you get it into your home, there are lots of other uses for these jars. I mean, you can use them for storage. I mean, there's lots of other uses.
I hear lots of things. I hear people that have pallets of them that are used and they don't know what to do with them. I hear folks that are, trying to do something with reusing them, but it kind of runs the gamut.
Well, I was thinking more just for the lids, not the jars, the child resistant lids, allowing PCR there. Like doing a categorical.
There are PCR lids on our.
I was saying just a categorical waiver for like PCR above 60% or something like that.
Well, maybe for manufacturers, the problem is like, I don't know if that would apply to cultivators. I mean, we've taken a pretty large stand that child resistant packaging is for products, not for flower.
Yeah, I'm thinking more about the manufacturers. That's who we've heard from. But I don't know.
I think I need to think more about that specifically. But again, the current waivers that are in existence, and folks can continue to put more waivers into the system in the meantime, if they have a company that they think meets those 43% PCR requirements. I think there's at least one or two in there right now that I'm trying to find time to review.
Okay.
Are we getting very many new waivers? I mean, there was certainly a rush.
There's a couple that have lingered. I haven't seen, we've gotten some information about prices going up. I have not seen a rush.
Right.
I mean, Gabe, you can correct me if I'm wrong. There's a couple in the hopper, but over the last couple of months, I wouldn't say it's an astronomical number.
No, we're kind of just looking ahead to, if things continue on the trajectory they are. In terms of clarifying what we can do today, we're talking about extending all of the waivers that are in the categorical and product specific to October 27.
That's what I was prepared to do today.
Okay, that makes sense. Do you see any that are product specific that could be categorical?
Well, I think that's kind of what you're alluding to with lids. Just not sure.
Or like rubber stoppers, like the
those are already categorical.
I would need more.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm prepared to kind of put my vote behind that today.
That makes sense. Just in terms of framing the future conversation, it might make sense to think in the other direction too. You might have gotten my pitch as simplification at all costs, but it's striking how many bag waivers we have for flower at this point, when it seems relatively easy just to say the Vermont rule is flower comes in glass. We're done here. And it'd be fair among competitors, it would probably tend to encourage reuse to the extent that somebody was willing to invest in a sanitization system. And it'd be really simple to administer because there'd be no bags. Why do you need a bag? I've heard to the contrary. Of course, there are some folks that are doing deli style sales that do need them. But all I'm really saying is all of the movement doesn't have to be contra environmental protection. I think it may be prudent to look at, should we walk back some of the bag uses for flower and just head toward a more stable standard. Again, what we're hearing from people really is, I want to be able to plan, and it's getting harder and harder. But that's all. I just want to kind of encourage you to think in both directions.
Well, I think if it's all right, and it doesn't contradict what you just said, Gabe, that we do vote or whatever we have to do to extend the current waivers for two years till October 27. Come back, I think probably at our next meeting about, I don't even know, like, I mean, it is just a categorical waiver on PCR lids, a non-starter for you, period? Or is there a way we could just design it?
I think I would need to talk to some folks internally and also some other. I'm just concerned that somebody might buy something in a large quantity that then gets taken off the shelf.
Yeah.
And if we're doing it that way, I would expect more spot checking, because there might not be a product registration checkpoint anymore for that specific category of packaging. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I don't want to be put in the situation. I don't want anybody to be put in the situation where we're pulling product because it's in the wrong lid, right? I don't think we've done that. necessarily yet because product registration catches so much, but I also don't want it to gum up product registration because they're responsible for looking at packaging to make sure it's compliant if we went that direction. So I think I need to think more about what are the advantages or pros and cons of moving in that direction for some products and how we would clearly communicate it internally and externally.
Is it worth bringing in Josh, is it, from the solid DEC? Solid waste.
Maybe I have them on the agenda
Yeah.
for June to talk about cannabis waste and other contexts.
Yeah. So maybe we can probe on this issue a little bit.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that there's a lot of like cannabis packaging wholesale companies that they market themselves as something and it's not really that thing. And that's when I look at waivers, that is 80% of the reason why something doesn't get approved is because it's not what they're claiming it is on their website. If you look at the details or you ask for more information. And so if that happens and then we do a spot check and we look at all the information, it's more about, the specific company at that point and what they've sold a licensee versus, we can ask Josh about PCR and, what's an appropriate level and, how can it be disposed of properly and all those questions. But I'm just concerned about buying it from a licensee putting into a scenario where they're buying $10,000 worth of packaging that is not what we think it is. And then we got to take it off the shelf and everybody is unhappy, So those are my concerns.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like we have ways to deal with that, whether people are acting in bad faith or in good faith. It's kind of trying to assess was I sold a bill of goods from a greenwash company or did I actually just, negligently buy a bunch of packaging that I knew probably wasn't compliant.
I just think it's a slippery slope to what happens when it happens again and again and again and again. And how willing are we to find people and pull products like fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me type of stuff, So those are my concerns. Not saying I'm unmovable.
Yeah.
It's just I need more time to kind of understand the landscape.
I do want to say for the benefit of people listening who may be very worried if they're if they're making orders, we have policies about dealing with this so people can spend down what they have. Last time I think this came up in a big way. We asked people to declare what they had, sometimes checked so that we don't have to take Bill's word for it, but then let them spend down. So nobody's going to, we're not going to create giant waste in service of environmental virtue. So
sure, I'm just trying to think of it all before we make a big, it's a big decision after 4 years of I'm not ready to make it today.
Okay. But we can extend the 2 year. We can extend waivers for 2 years today. Is that all right?
Yes, you can do that by motion today. And I think we change all those last numbers to sevens, and a lot of people would have some more predictability coming right out of this meeting. So that makes some sense if you're comfortable doing it.
Okay.
Do you want to commit the board also to what the other part that Kyle proposed, which is to look further into this? Do you think that needs to be included in the motion, or is that just something that we've all
I think we just put it on the agenda
consensus
for next
Okay.
meeting. A month from now, we can think through what does that matrix look like? Should we be thinking about a categorical waiver? We'll also probably know a little bit more about tariffs and, as we get closer to Q4. But
My goal is to try and have, if this is the direction I wanted to go, have a reimagined waiver system by, midsummer. Next meeting is the end of June. It's not too far off, but over the course of summer, do check-ins to kind of understand how that process is going ahead of when folks think things might actually hit the fan and be less theoretical.
okay. Great. All right. Well, so why don't I would entertain a motion to extend all existing waivers, categorical and product specific, until October of 2027.
So moved.
Second.
Any last discussion on that? No. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And at next meeting, we'll try and explore some of these other kind of more system-wide questions.
Yeah, I'll make sure I talk to New York about how their program's going in Canada. And
Sure. Yeah, I
I'll be
appreciate
good.
it. I do. I know you take a lot of heat on this issue. Okay. Great. Next on the agenda is a multi-year product registration discussion. Yeah, would you mind giving us the background here as well?
Happy to do it. My 20-minute HP battery
Yeah.
has given up, but I remember enough that it's unbelievable that they can make
Do you
a
have
battery.
this power?
Nah, it's fine. As you know, from those of you who have been involved in the miscellaneous cannabis bill this year, there was a proposal from industry, which everybody pretty much agreed with, to extend the duration of product registrations, just as a simple way to reduce administrative burden both on our staff and licensees. The one concern that came up with that in the course of discussing it with the General Assembly was there are some products for which that's not appropriate. They may be less stable. They may be kind of experimental, may not be the kind of thing that you'd want to be through registration for 24 months. So what we wound up with, if it passes into law, which we don't know at this point, will be a change to the product registration statute that provides that the cost of a product registration will stay the same, that the presumptive period, it doesn't use the word presumptive, but that most registrations will be 2 years by default, but the board can change the duration as long as it keeps the price the same per annum, depending on the product. That's going to require you, if it becomes law, to make some guidance around that. I talked a little bit with one of the proponents about that. And that probably means thinking about broad categories of products and what the default should be for them. For example, it's pretty broadly recognized flower past a year really needs to be reevaluated. Whereas an alcohol-based tincture, for example, very shelf stable for like a decade, according to most people that study that kind of thing. And then there are the in-betweens. There are the, baked products, gummies, that kind of thing. So all of this is just to say that if that provision enters into the law, we'll need some guidance to steer both to inform registrants how long they can expect a product will be registerable, and to steer staff in terms of when it's appropriate to deviate. I had sent you a memorandum that has more kind of illustrative by category ideas about how you might assign things by category, as well as what you might put in guidance in terms of factors that could be considered if to justify upward or downward deviation from the 2-year average. That would be things like if you had something that had a particular carbohydrate and moisture content, especially if you had something that went through process review and got an opinion that called into question its stability, for example. And then finally is the question of what do you do with testing? It used to be the testing rode along with the registration. Does it still? Is there, or will it not if that change takes effect? I think that's a decision for the board to make in terms of how it applies the new statutory language. And again, we're not sure that'll become law.
Thanks. Do you mind, before we get into this conversation, we take just a quick break?
Not at all.
Okay. I just have to use the restroom.
But it's okay. I need to blow my nose, so
Okay.
that's good.
Patrick, would you mind just pausing us for 5 minutes? We'll be back in 5 minutes.
I don't think I was this sick when I came to work,
Yeah.
so I'm very sorry.
All right, Patrick, we're all back. Okay, just as a quick time check, 2:51 p.m., May 28th, 2025. Okay, well, to me, I mean, the foundational question is whether we think that testing and product registration need to coincide, go hand in hand, or they can be decoupled. I think clearly the industry, when they asked for this proposal, expected a 2-year product registration means one test that's good for 2 years. But we don't have, I just want to level set that we don't have to make any real hard decisions today other than who do we need to talk to figure this out, because we are not the FDA, we're not ASTM. Like, I don't have a chemistry background. I feel like this is a tough thing for us to answer. I don't think any state has a great handle on this. There's a camera thread about this exact issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Nevada has some very specific guidelines. Maybe we want to talk to someone from Nevada as to how they came up with this.
They're doing expiration dates, right?
Expiration, yeah.
They also have product registration.
In Colorado, it looks like they have something, although I think in their comment, they said this is just kind of not fully fleshed out.
Yeah.
But I think, so initial question we have to answer is, should the registration be the same testing? So is it essentially an expiration date?
So I'm making an assumption and thinking that if somebody's producing a product like a vape or, any kind of solid concentrate, it's going to be packaged.
Right.
And if it's sitting on the shelf for a year or 2 years, it's going to be in the pack. So testing becomes more difficult.
Yeah, yes, for sure. Yeah. And then potency, potency degrades in flower after 12 to 18 months. So the label is not going to be accurate anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Gabe, it's not just, not to make our lives more complicated, but it's not just a 1 year or 2 year product registration. The legislation contemplates us being able to say flowers 18 months, edibles 2 years, or gummies are 2 years, seltzers are 1 year. I mean,
it does. Now that I've got a battery back, I can tell you what it says, which is product. This is what it would say if the amendment enters into law. Product registrations shall be valid for 2 years unless the board determines through readily accessible published guidance that such a registration should be longer or shorter, and in which case it's prorated at the same cost of $50 per year.
Yeah.
So in concept, you could take a tincture and say, that's good for 5 years. We don't need to see it again.
So then certainly we would want our compliance team involved in this discussion as well, just to think about how this is actually how to implement whatever it is we try and come up with.
That makes a lot of sense to me to have the PR team involved, and they have much better picture of what this kind of spectrum of what they're seeing.
Right.
There's some research I think that we need to look at too. I think you and I both went to the Canada presentation from Canada
Right.
that talked about the metal leaching in vapes
Right.
as they sit. They didn't, I can't remember them being specific about like whether that was a test that was done after 12 months or 24
Right.
months. Or,
Yeah. So I think, I'd like to get our 2 labs' opinion about this, as well as our lab director. We have hired our lab director. I don't want to say the name quite yet, so I don't know if that person has told their current employer.
I think they start next week. So
Okay, so hopefully.
hopefully.
So our lab director, our 2 labs, I'd like to hear from Nevada about how they came up with theirs, Colorado.
Yep.
Is it GMPP that works with ASTM? I'm trying to remember the person's name.
Oh yeah, it's David Valancourt.
That's it.
Yeah, I'll get Valancourt probably would be helpful. We have our consultants that could help us as well. CPC. Certainly, we need some industry representation on this. I don't know if we want to get specific about that or just have kind of an open dialogue about it.
dialogue's probably appropriate, so anybody who wants to.
Yeah,
right.
I don't know
Talk.
where we would kick.
Okay.
We're gonna invite these folks to come and present essentially, right? That's
I
what we're
think
talking
just,
about.
that's what I would love. I
Okay.
mean, as far as Nevada and Colorado, how did you come up with
Mhm.
these numbers on the paper? What was your thinking here? When it comes to our consultants and Valencourt and Callie, Luke, and our lab director, I feel like that, and our compliance team in the industry, I feel like that can just be a free floating conversation.
Mhm.
Okay. I mean, the goal is to just have certain products, I mean, that are certain categories of products that just have longer registrations.
Yep.
So, I mean, one thing that I've heard repeatedly is that the seltzers, any of the emulsions separate over time, and that specifically with the drinks, that they can leach into the lining of the can. So
The cannabinoids,
are kind of gone after you test it after a year,
Or they float to the top.
or they float to the top, right? So getting someone who's kind of an expert on the drinks, especially.
I bet we can find someone through Canra.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
had a presentation recently from an industry person.
right. Gabe, do you have any advice for us on how to figure this out?
I wish I did. I reached out to some of the people in industry who are interested in this and asked if they're aware of any consensus documents or industry standards that have been published and are broadly accepted. Other than checking with with our contacts at Canada and looking at what other states have done. But the food industry is, the obvious place to go looking for some of that, VDH possibly. I had a recommendation to you, more of a technical legal nature, in that if this becomes effective July 1, the default in the absence of guidance is 2 years across the board for everything. And I'm not sure that that's desirable to the board from a public health and safety perspective, until there's been some thinking about what should be lower, because everything will just default to 2 in the absence of guidance. In order to hold the status quo, in case that happens, before you've been able to dive in more deeply, it might be wise of you at this meeting, just as a technical matter, to instruct staff to publish, if the amendment occurs on July 1, to immediately publish guidance specifying that a 1-year registration is necessary across the board, just to hold things steady while deeper discussions are had.
As this amendment was being debated, Olga also mentioned to me that we have a lot of IT work that's happening right now that is supposed to be done by July 1st, I think. So it's really changing our website right now without, this isn't in the scope of that work. Contract was signed well before this amendment was being contemplated. It may require a new contract just to fix our registration portal.
Right.
So that's another little complication there. Because I was thinking immediately we could just say, like, tinctures should have a 2-year, something like some low hanging fruit. But I think it's a little bit more complicated than that from a
Right, because
IT
of the
perspective.
testing is required to be uploaded, right?
Yeah. So, okay. Well, I've got our labs, I've got Nevada and Colorado, I've got ASTM, our consultants. I'll ask VDH, the Department of Health, what they feel about this and who they may direct us to. I'd like to focus in on the drinks because there's some unique aspects. Maybe focus in on the vapes.
EDH could probably give us a decent opinion about things like gummies, where the consistency is not going to change. Well,
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if the THC. I wouldn't think so.
I asked Callie that just in passing. She's like, 2 years. We haven't done a lot of tests on gummies. I think that are 2 years old. We've got one test that we've done, and the potency remains stable after 2 years, but they don't have a huge data set on that.
Right.
But maybe other states
So
do.
then it matters how it's packaged because it could dry out.
Okay. I mean, we're not we're not putting a like Best By date on the label. We're just, or this
No,
new
because we don't
legislation.
have the data to do
tacked
that.
on.
Like the way that Best By dates go on dairy products is like, it's a determination of when it goes in the carton and like
Right.
how it's cared for, you know, like it's not,
But
and it's still an
consumers-
estimate.
consumers will see the package on date no matter what, so they can make a choice as to whether or not they want to purchase something that's a gummy
Harvested.
that's 2 years old.
Yeah, and I think, we're not really arbiters of freshness.
Right.
We get interested when there's a safety or accuracy issue, which
Right.
is, so I think we want to think in terms not of consumer desirability. Consumers can decide that, but at what point are those COAs no longer to be relied upon by reasonable people?
Yeah, okay. Great. All right, well, anyone we want to add to the list for this conversation? And we can,
That's a good list for now.
yeah,
Yeah.
gives us a starting point. Okay. All right, well, not a lot to decide, not a lot of decisions there. Sorry, team.
I've got one for you.
Okay, all right.
One more.
Yeah.
Which is that you'll have to make a policy decision because the legislation leaves it ambiguous when somebody is eligible for a multi-year registration, but doesn't want to pay the commensurate fee. For example, the person who's got a tincture, and you could comfortably say that's good for 10 years, but they don't want to pay $500.
Okay,
And
yes.
should you make the shorter durations available to those who only want a shorter duration?
So I think that's where the IT aspect of this is like, I think, yes, in theory, exactly, like I'm with you there.
Like
right?
registration, like
Right,
car
yeah,
registration.
right, but that's where the IT infrastructure needs changing, so I would want to bring all in that decision, but I mean, philosophically, absolutely, I would want to give people the option of going shorter, even though we've said a tincture can go 2 years or 5 years.
That makes sense.
Okay, we need to adopt our regular board meeting schedule for the rest of the year. Can't remember if we have a proposal on that. I know we have a proposal. I can't remember where. Find that.
Patrick sent it to us.
I have it if you want me to read it.
Yeah, are you able to pull it up, or is it not in a form here?
It's just in an email, so I don't know that I'm gonna share my inbox, so,
All right.
And I didn't say them out loud.
Yeah, well, would you mind just reading them, Patrick? And generally, it's the same schedule. It's the last Wednesday of the month, unless there's a conflict.
yeah, exactly. It sticks to the last Wednesday of each month with the exception of holidays on November and December. So that works out to be Wednesday, July 30th, Wednesday, August 27th, Wednesday, September 24th, October 29th, and then we have some reschedules here for November 19th and December 17th.
Okay. And that works for everyone on staff? Yeah.
As far as I know.
And it works for all of us?
Yes.
Okay, we'll just keep it as is. So is there a motion to approve the regular meeting schedule that we'll post later?
I move that the board adopt the proposed meeting schedule from July to December 2025.
I would second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. All right. I think that is the last thing on the agenda.
May I
Oh, sure.
butt in with a couple of forgotten things?
Yeah, please.
They're pretty minor, but it's while we have the audience in mind as well. Licensing asked me if I would butt in with a reminder about an upcoming change in their payment process. In anticipation of a change to Rule 1.15.4B, some IT work has already been done. The legal authority to do this is already there. It just hasn't been our practice. But the IT work is underway so that effective June 15th, 2025, that's very soon, you'll have an option to pay via check or online payment at renewal. And one has to be prepared to make that payment at the time of the renewal submission.
Okay.
It had been that they had multiple contacts. So payment has to be made in full at the time of the submission. Payment can be by check or online payment, meaning online credit card payment, I think. And if you choose check, choose wisely, because once you've done that, you can't go back and pay with the credit card.
Okay.
So it's digesting. I think it's a big mess.
Okay.
So it probably can be done, but it's probably not great. The final item, which I wonder if it's up to you whether you put it on your agenda, but I heard from a hospital compliance officer the other day who was doing a really interesting project, trying to develop SOPs around legal destruction of cannabis. There, it's not strictly speaking something the board has to weigh in on, but in speaking with her, I realized a lot of hospitals are probably reinventing the wheel. If anybody listening is interested in that corner or has information about a similar project in other medical facilities, give me a shout, I guess, and I'll try to put those people together. I don't, it's something the board could take up if it wanted to, but is not strictly speaking. We're not a regulator of possession of this particular drug by non-licensees.
Gotcha. Like hospitals confiscating and.
Yeah, and they sort of don't know what to do with it. And some of the medical waste disposal goes across state lines, and the medical waste haulers are saying no thanks. With regard to flower, advice to them is really simple. Do what we do in our guide, and we recommend in our guide: stir it into the soil, put it in your composting stream. It's more products that I think is a challenge for them, and some of that is beyond our legal authority. I'm just kind of trying to be helpful to them if we can.
I know DEC has asked us some questions too about disposal.
Maybe we can prep DEC for that. They're coming in June.
Tentatively.
Yeah.
I got them all at once.
Yeah, we were gonna ask them that too.
Okay, well, I didn't mean to ask a question at the end of class like that, but I want to tell you before I forgot.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, any concluding thoughts before we sign off? No.
No.
Okay. All right. I'll adjourn the meeting then. Thanks.